What does it take to live an uncommon life when pain, pressure, and setbacks refuse to let up? Today on Unmasked, we're going to sit down with a leader whose life has been shaped by cancer, crisis, and calling, and who's learned that resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, but about choosing not to quit when it shows up. Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode, we have honest conversations with people who have walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with leaders, pastors, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. Today's guest is Terry Tucker, an author, speaker, and founder of Motivational Check, LLC. Someone who believes deeply in the power of story to motivate, challenge, and bring lasting value to others. With a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the Citadel and a master's degree from Boston University, he brings both intellectual rigor and real-world wisdom into every conversation about leadership, mindset, and purpose. What sets his voice apart, though, is lived experience. Over a 13-year cancer journey, combined with careers spanning the NCAA Division I athletics, marketing, healthcare, administration, law enforcement as SWAT hostage negotiator, entrepreneurship, and coaching, he has learned the resilience from every angle. He is the author of Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, as well as a featured contributor to Perspectives on Cancer. His message is clear and hard-earned. You don't become extraordinary by avoiding pain. You become extraordinary by how you respond to it. Terry, thank you so much for joining us today on Unmasked and being willing to share your story with us all.
Well, Wesley, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
You know what? When you agreed to come on the show, I got a little bit excited because I think your story is going to be a good one, and I'm really excited to hear it. So, I'm just going to give the floor over to you and let you share what brought you with us today.
Sure. So I was born on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. I've got a brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame's baseball team. Another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So we used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on, at the front of the church. But our 5'8" mother was always the boss. So when I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I was actually the first person in my family to graduate from college. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother because I thought they did such a great job that I wanted to be part of that. And then, as you mentioned, at 37, I made the major pivot in my life and became a police officer. It was always my dream. Part of what I did was I was on the SWAT team as a hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But for the last almost 14 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 32 years. We have one child, a daughter. He's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
You've definitely been through and experienced a lot, I think some of which most people would only, dream about doing. I mean, talk us through your kind of how you got to where you are. I mean, you kind of did your high level of, what you've been through. But when you think about living unmasked, it's all about um the journey, the hard stuff that we've gone through and how our faith has helped us. So talk to us a little bit about the challenges that you faced in your life and how your faith has helped you through those challenges.
Sure. So I think one of the biggest adult decisions, and it was an adult decision, but it was certainly done in faith, was what I was going to do when I graduated from college. I wanted to follow in my paternal grandfather's footsteps. He was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty. My dad was 1 year old at the time, but he remembered growing up all the stories my grandmother told him of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into that line of work, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to live. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to live, that God was calling me to live. So I had a choice. My dad, as I mentioned, was dying of cancer when I graduated from college. I could have said, "Hey, Dad, yeah, no, you're dying. Sorry, I'm going to go blaze my own trail, do my own thing." Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that backstory, my resume kind of looks, there's kind of an understanding there. My first two jobs were in business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did, waited till my father passed away and I followed my own dreams. But honestly, Wesley, the thing I'm most proud of in my life is that God never let that dream die in me. God never said, hey, you're a hospital administrator, you're making decent money, just stay where you are. It was, no, I'm going to pull you away from, the suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and I'm going to put you where I need you, where I want you. And that was always on my heart. That was always, I knew I was going to do it. I just didn't know when I was going to do it. I think a lot of times, we think about we're going to do things on our time and we realize that no, we're going to do things on God's time. And a lot of times that's not the same time. And so at 37 years old, I became a rookie police officer. And I'll tell you this, I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my younger counterparts and stuff like that. But it was just something I knew God wanted me to do. And that was the first time that I really felt called, to I need you to do this. And I wanted to do it. It wasn't like I was scared or anything like that. It was, I know that that's what you want me to do. That's what I am going to do. And it was more like, when do you want me to do this? I'd like to do this. Nope, not now. Wait. And Wesley, I am not a patient person. I am not somebody that, just, okay, God, whenever. It's like, no, God, come on, let's go. But I was so glad at 37 to graduate from the police academy because I knew that's what I was supposed to do with my life. And that started a very kind of conversational point with God of talking to him about, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? How am I supposed to serve you without really knowing I had something on my heart? But it's like, why aren't you letting me do this? It's like, I am. You just got to wait. And maybe it was God's way of teaching me patience.
He definitely has a way of teaching us things, and sometimes it's always in a way, or sometimes it's done in a way that we don't like, but at the same time it's in a way that in the end makes us better. But in the moment it's very difficult for us to um come to terms with, or it gives us a hard pill to swallow, if you will.
Yeah, it really does. And then, we fast forward I'm 51 years old. I'm coaching girls' high school basketball, and I have a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot. And I don't think of it. You really don't. You're a coach. You're on your feet a lot, so I don't really pay much attention to it. But after a couple of weeks of it not healing, make an appointment to go see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he takes an X-ray and he says, "Terry, I think you have a cyst in there, and I can cut it out." And he does, and he shows it to me, just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gives either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sends it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, I get the phone call from him that we all dread. And as I said, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming. Until finally he says, he just lays it out for me. Wesley, he's like, "Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. I have a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet, the palms of the hands, or the nail beds that has nothing to do with sun exposure. And because my cancer was so rare, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and be treated. And I did. And they excised the bottom of my foot. They took out all the lymph nodes in my groin. And then they looked at me and said, "You more than likely will be dead in 2 years because we have absolutely nothing to offer you." And it was like, okay, I've been given a death sentence. How do I learn, or how do I train, or what do I do to turn that death sentence into a life sentence? And that was another come to Jesus sort of discussion of, am I going to die? And there was a lot of, I guess I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. First of all, it was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right. And then there was anger. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then there was kind of a bargaining with God. Our daughter was in high school at the time, a very formative time in her life. It's like, look, God, just let me live long enough to be there for her until she gets out of high school. And then there was absolutely a downtime, a depressed, I felt sorry for myself. And then I came out the other end and was basically, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I don't like the cards that I've been dealt. I want to fold. I want to reshuffle those cards and see if I can come up with a better hand. But at some point in time, you need to play the hand that was dealt you. And there were a lot of nights of, "Oh, God, what do you want me to do? What's going on here? Is this, I'm just going to die? Or is this something bigger than me?" And honestly, Wesley, for the last 14 years, this has absolutely been something that's bigger than me.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that they basically said you had 2 years to live, and now you're sitting here 13 years later. And there's just something so powerful when you think about that and the things that you've been through. And I'm sure the doctors are like, we have no idea what's going on. Like, they just can't explain it, but you can. You can tell them exactly why you're still sitting here, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you
I
think,
mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, these doctors, they're like, in 2012, when I was diagnosed, we have nothing but surgery for you. I mean, if somewhere we can cut it out, we'll cut it out. Otherwise, we have nothing. And now it'll be 14 years in April. And the development of drugs, of surgeries, of things now for this form of melanoma. And I've been kind of on the forefront of a lot of it. I've been the guinea pig for, we're going to try this and see if it works. I always say that this is bigger than me. And you need to find meaning in your misery. I don't believe any of us suffers in vain. There's something we're supposed to learn, something we're supposed to understand through whatever we're going through. And one of the biggest questions, and this is going to sound real elementary, one of the biggest questions that I ask myself, and I think a lot of people ask themselves when you are told you've been given a death sentence, is, do you want to live? And that's, well, of course I want to live, but a lot of people don't. a lot of people are like, I don't want to go through the pain, the ugliness. I mean, I've had my foot amputated. I had my leg amputated above the knee during the COVID pandemic, was told I would be in the hospital for 10 to 14 days to learn how to function without a leg, and was sent home 48 hours after the surgery because of COVID. And my wife and I were like, what? But it's like, all right, God, you obviously want to, we'll figure it out. What do you want us to do? And God sent people into our life that helped us, that got us through that. And I've been through this, but I've never been through this alone. There's always been somebody there. And I should have died so many times during that 14 years. And so many of the people I was with have died. And it's like, okay, God, I have a friend in Washington State, and we always talk about God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying. Spend more time focused on the living, on what God wants us to do while we're here.
Wow. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around everything. I mean, just the story that you just shared, from being the guinea pig for everything cancer related, to being told you had 2 years to live. Now you're almost 14 years, to being told, you're going to be in the hospital for 14 days after having your leg amputated, basically, and being sent home 48 hours later and having to figure it out on your own. I mean, that's just insane when you really think about it. I mean, the journey that you have been through has just taught you so much and has really shaped your identity. What has your journey taught you about your identity and who we are apart from roles and productivity and physical ability?
That's a great question. I'll tell you this. I don't look at myself as a cancer patient. And I think I get labeled a lot. And I'll kind of give you that. I was 6'8", well, still am 6'8", 230 pounds. When I would walk into a room, everybody would stare. Everybody would look. Now I'm in a wheelchair and I don't have a left leg. So when I roll into a room, the same thing happens. People look at you and they want to, ooh, what's going on with that? And Wesley, there's a professor at the University of Chicago, a psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. And the idea is you go out and get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. You go deep with another human being. And I'm just going to make this up. You get on a bus, first question, hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Second question, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Third question, have you always wanted to be a doctor? Wesley, it doesn't matter what they tell you. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened in my life. Or my mom was a doctor but died of breast cancer when she was 40, and so I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their purpose, their mission, their why in life. And we don't go deep with people anymore. Social media allows us to stay on the surface. Like you said, that's Unmasked. That's your podcast. We're unmasking. Everything's great. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. It's not always wonderful. It's not always great. One of the things that I was given, I was put on a drug therapy when I was initially diagnosed. And my oncologist said, this isn't going to cure you. All we're doing is trying to kick the can down the road to try to buy you more time. And it was a drug called interferon. And I took a weekly interferon injection on Saturday. And for the next 3.5 days, I had a terrible case of the flu. I mean, figure your worst case of the flu. And that's how I felt. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having a terrible case of the flu every week for 5 years and knowing this wasn't a cure. And Wesley, there were times I was so sick of being sick that I prayed to die. It was like, come on, God, just take me out of this. I am contributing zero, nothing, zilch to my family. Just take me out of this. Let my family get on with their life. But he didn't. He didn't take me out of it. But he did give me the strength to get up every morning. And sometimes a good day was literally, I'm just going to get out of bed and I'm going to make it to the couch. That was a good day. That was a win for me. That's how lousy I felt. If you would ask me at that point in my life, what are your goals? Like, goals. I just hope I wake up tomorrow morning. That was that was my goal. If I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll figure out what I'm going to do. And it was, I think it was God saying, what's the, St. Paul talking about, I have a thorn in my, in my hand, and God, get rid of it. No, my grace is sufficient for you to handle this. And I think that was God's way of starting this journey of, you need to rely on me. This isn't about you. And Wesley, I've been asked a lot of times on podcasts, if I could live my life over again without cancer, would I do it? And in all honesty, I don't think I would, because cancer has made me a better human being. It's allowed me to connect with other human beings. And, I can sit in the waiting room waiting to go back for infusion therapy and see somebody, kind of with that deer in the headlights look. It's their first time there. They're scared. They're nervous. They're worried. And I know what that looks like, because I did it when I was there initially. And I just wheel over in my wheelchair and say, hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? And all of a sudden, the person is seen as a person, as a human being, not as a cancer patient, not as an infusion patient, but as a human. And I tell, look, I've been coming here for 4.5 years. These are the greatest nurses. They're going to take care of you. Everything is going to be okay. And I may never see that person again, but just having that connection, just another human being to another human being, that's what's important to me right now, Wesley. It's 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was even here. But today, I want those deep connections with other human beings. I want to get to the soul level with another human being.
Yeah, I love that, because one of the things that I often say, and when I'm talking to people and they're like, I don't understand why I'm going through this. I don't understand why this has to be a part of my story. And I tell them, I'm like, you're going through this because down the road, it's going to allow you to connect with that one person that feels like they're alone and nobody understands. And that's why we live unmasked, is because when we live unmasked and we're willing to come up to these people and say, hey, I've been where you are. And you're willing to wheel over in your case and say, hey, I'm Terry. What's your name? And just connect with them as a person and let them know that they're not alone. Now they know that there's somebody else in their corner that has been there, and it gives them hope. And that's what this is all about, is living unmasked and helping other people have hope that they're not alone, and that they are not the only one to go through this journey. So, Terry, when you think about all the things that you've been through, you've had this amazing career. I listed off a whole list of things that you've done in your career time. How did cancer reshape the way that you define success, especially compared to how you defined it earlier in your career and in even your athletic life?
Sure. So the greatest definition of success that I've ever heard in my life came from a basketball coach when I was growing up. He was John Wooden, the basketball coach at UCLA, who won an incredible amount of championships, won 7 NCAA championships in a row. And Coach Wooden, one of the most successful coaches of all times. And if you listen to this definition that I'm going to give you of success, nowhere in there does he talk about winning. And here's the definition. Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing that you did the best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. And one of the things Coach Wooden did before he got into college sports and athletics was he was an English teacher in Indiana. And he used to tell the story about if somebody worked incredibly hard, did everything they could, and got a C in English, were they successful? And he would say, yeah, I think they were. Versus somebody who didn't work hard at all, was never challenged, and got an A in that English class, were they successful? And he would say, I don't think they were, because they never pushed themselves. They never did everything they could to become the best that they were capable of becoming. And I think that's, that has stayed with me. I was following John Wooden when I was 12, 13 years old and things like that. That has always been my go-to definition of success. Did I leave it all out on the court? Did I leave it all, as a police officer, did I do everything I could to help that person or make that arrest or do that investigation or whatever? Did I give it everything I had? And if the answer was yes, then I was successful. And we tend to say, I've got to win. Well, what does winning look like? Because to you, it may be on the scoreboard. I have more points than the other team, so I'm a winner. I'm successful. But if you didn't try very hard, if you didn't give it your all, I don't think you are successful. And I think that's something certainly when I was in athletics, when I was in college playing basketball, high school playing basketball, when I coached my teams when I was in high school, but even in cancer, did I give it all? Did I do everything I could today and lay exhausted on that bed, after treatment or after surgery or did I give it everything I had? And Wesley, one of the things I made a very conscious decision is when I got sick, I said, look, I'm never going to blame or take it out on a nurse or a doctor or a therapist or somebody who's trying to help me. And I'll end with this story. For 4.5 years, I was getting a clinical trial drug, and I was doing it every 3 weeks. And on Monday, the first thing I had to do was be in the lab to get a blood draw before I could get the medication. So I was at the lab at 6 a.m, was there as the woman, the receptionist, opened the doors. And I would always ask her, how was your weekend? How's your family? She had a side business. How'd your side business go and stuff like that? And she said to me one day, she said, you're always kind to me. You're always nice to me. You're always asking me about myself and my family. And I said to her, well, thank you. I said, but isn't everybody nice to you? She said, no. She said, people are mean. They're rude. They talk down to me. And I tried to get her to look at the difference between perception and perspective. I said, perception is your background, your education, the way you grew up, your family dynamics, all that. It's everything that you've been through in your life. The problem is it's only germane to you because only you have had that exact experience. Perspective is putting yourself in the shoes of another person. So I said to her, look, you have a tremendous opportunity. People are coming up here and they're scared because this blood test may tell them they're going to have chemotherapy, or they're going to have surgery, or maybe they're going into hospice because there's nothing else that can be done for them. You have a tremendous opportunity by putting the perspective of that person on you and being kind, smiling at them, being nice no matter how much they treat you poorly. And you could tell the light bulb came on. And over the next couple of months, she was like, I love what you told me because now I try to be kind to every human being that come, no matter how they treat me, even if they're mad at me, they're yelling at me, whatever, I always try to be kind to them. But I always looked at life and those people from my perception instead of their perspective.
There's something so powerful in that because when people are there and they're yelling at you, they're not yelling at you because they're scared. They're going through things and this is just how it's manifesting. And it's very easy for us to take everything personal. And so I love that perspective that you shared. You said control your mind or it will control you. What did that lesson cost you to learn, especially during your cancer journey?
So I was actually kind of lucky to learn that lesson early. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school, and one actually kind of kept me out for almost an entire year. I missed an entire year of playing basketball. And when I went back playing basketball, I remember my mind, my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your surgeries, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their college or university. I learned that I had to change the narrative. I had to change the paradigm that was going on in my mind. And I'll give you a kind of an interesting story. I was very lucky actually to hear this. So when I was at the Citadel, which is a military college, my sophomore year, the president of the college was a man by the name of James Stockdale. Now, I don't know if that name rings a bell, but Stockdale had been the highest ranking prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton, the prisoner of war camp during the Vietnam conflict. He was shot down doing a bombing run over Vietnam. And he actually won the Medal of Honor for prisoner organization and resistance in that during his almost 8 years in captivity. And now I didn't spend a lot of time around him. He was the president of the college. I was just a cadet. But I remember being at a gathering where somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture, that ugliness? And he said, let me tell you the people who didn't survive. He said, it wasn't the big, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And then the next thing he said really, really surprised me. He said, the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said, these were the people that thought they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Easter. And he said, when those holidays would come and go and they wouldn't be rescued, he said, those people died of a broken heart. He said, the people who survived were the people who understood what they could control, which according to Stockdale was basically the breathing in our lungs and the thoughts in our minds, and controlled them. He said, everything else is outside your paradigm. Everything else is outside your purview. And I learned this technique from my dad. My dad used to tell us, if something's bothering you, take out a piece of paper and write down every single thing that's bothering you, everything that's in your mind. And he said, then when you've got everything out on paper, go through and cross out everything that you specifically have no control over. Whatever's left on that piece of paper is something you can work on. So I think, honestly, Wesley, where we get in trouble is we try to control all these things in our lives that we have no control over. And we get, we get down, we get depressed. Oh, I can't. Well, you can't control that. I mean, if a guy like Stockdale, can say, hey, it's only the things that you can control that you need to control. I mean, that guy went through hell literally for 8 years. And I'm looking for a quote here and I found it. This is called the Stockdale paradox. And it goes like this. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. And I love that. I mean, it's like you can never lose faith. You can, faith in yourself, faith in your peers, faith in your creator, with the understanding of these are the facts and this is what we're facing. You can never, putting those two together, you can never lose faith. And I've done that my entire life. God, you know what? I'm going to go through surgery. I'm going to take off my leg. You got this, because I don't got this. I don't got this, because literally the day I had that surgery, COVID was going on. My wife dropped me off at the hospital. She couldn't come in with me. I was in this cavernous pre-op room that's designed to be prepping all kinds of people for surgery. And I was the only person in that room. Me, the nurse, and the anesthesiology resident. I was scared to death. And if I could have run out of there, I would have. But I had a broken leg. And it was like, all right, God, you got this, because I don't got it. And that's what controlling your mind is about.
It's all about that mindset and allowing the shift to take place. What was the first mindset shift that you remember that you had to make when cancer stopped being a battle and really became a long-term reality?
That I was somehow in control of this. Yeah, I told you before, I'm not a patient individual, and I mean, to have gone through 14 years almost now of this, with the understanding that so many times I have been put low, put down, like, you know what? I guess, I just told you about having my leg. I can't control this. I'm scared to death. When I was doing my clinical trial, I would every 3 weeks, I would go to the hospital Monday through Friday, and I would be treated with this drug that kept my tumors stable, but gave me terrible side effects. I shook violently, I threw up, I had a fever, I sweated, I had a headache. And I remember one of the nurses said, we love you so much because you come back every day knowing that you're going to have to go through this pain. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. I mean, I am physically doing it, but I'm not doing this by myself. And let me give you a story. Anybody who's listening to us out there that thinks your pain, thinks what your adversity that you're going through now doesn't matter, that nobody cares. There was a nurse who was about 25 years old, already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit where I was being treated, the infusion center unit. About 6 months later, she's taking care of me by herself. And she comes in and she says, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to tell it to you. I mean, Wesley, what do you say to somebody who says that to you? It's like, I said, okay, well, I hope you decide you want to tell it to me. I said, because I think I would enjoy hearing it. So she's in and out for the next couple hours and then finally comes in, sits down. She said, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. She said, I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you and I see how you come every day and you go through this terrible reaction to your medication, but you come back every single day. It never beats you. And she said, then I went back in your file when I was taking care of you and I read everything you've been through. You had your foot amputated, you had your leg amputated, you went through that interferon therapy and all that kind of stuff. She said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just by the way I showed up. I mean, I wasn't doing it. I was just doing my thing. Just by the way I showed up, I had made a positive difference in that individual. So anybody who's listening to us that thinks, you know what, this doesn't matter. I promise you, there is somebody, maybe more than one person, that's watching how you handle your adversity in life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't ever think that what you're going through doesn't matter. Again, find the meaning in your misery. There's a reason you're going through what you're going through.
Amen. I love that. You know what? I want to talk to the listeners here real quick. You know, Terry has shared some really deep stuff already. And I don't know about you, but as I've been just listening to him talk, it's stirred up some own things in my life and some thoughts of people that I think could really benefit from hearing this episode. So if that's you and you're listening to this and you're like, man, this person needs to hear this, would you take just a quick second and share this episode with them? Because I truly believe they came to mind for a reason. So take a moment and just share the episode. And then come back because I have a feeling Terry's going to lay some more knowledge on us that you're not going to want to miss because we're not done yet. You know, Terry, you have been through a lot of pain and discomfort. And when you think about those types of things, they're themes in your life, but you don't shy away from them. So how do you help people distinguish between pain that's shaping and pain that's simply wearing them down?
That's another great question. I think it's how you use the pain. Do you use it to make you stronger and more resilient? Our mammalian brains are designed to keep us safe, to keep us alive. And so anytime there's pain, anytime there's difficulty, anytime there's something dangerous, your brain is always telling you, get away from it, back off from it. Don't engage in that. But Wesley, we know this. We know the only way we're going to grow, the only way we're going to get better, the only way we're going to improve is if we step outside those comfort zones that we have and we do things that make us uncomfortable. I will offer this to your audience because I do this every single day of my life. Every day, do at least one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe you take a cold shower. Maybe you go work out when you don't want to. Whatever you don't want to do those things, because when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our jobs, like maybe we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than people who never step outside their comfort zones. And I'll end with this. There's a entrepreneur by the name of Ed Milet. 2023, USA Today named him Entrepreneur of the Year. And the first time I heard this, I was like, I'm not sure I agree with this. I gotta think about it. He talks about the 4 types of people in the world. And like I said, when I first heard this, I was like, let me think about this. He said the first type of person are the unmotivated. And we all know these people. They complain, they whine, nothing's ever right. There's always a problem. They never accept, whether it's hardship, whether it's difficult, even positive things. They're always complaining about something. He said that's the vast majority of people you will encounter in your life. The second group he talks about are the motivated. And he talks about it as being a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. He says it's rather low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a very happy and successful life. The third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from 2 words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I'm giving a talk, and depending on the group, especially with young people, I'll tell that story. I'll be like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? Nobody ever raises their hand. Nobody ever puts their hand up and says, yeah, that's me. I'm one of the unmotivated. But if you believe Milan, that's the vast majority of people you will encounter in your life. And I go back to Coach Wooden again, who gave me the definition of success. He talked about don't whine, don't complain. You want to be part of a team. We all need to be part of a team. We're so much better together than we are separate. And again, I bring God into that as well. It's, you put enough people together. What did Jesus say? It was 2 of you gathered in my name, there I will be. So you and somebody else, you and 5 other people, you and whatever, find good people to hang around with. God will be there with you.
You know, people have a way of there's a lot of different sayings out there about a lot of different things. We say sayings all the time, and a lot of times we mean the best things by them, or they mean but they don't always hold up when rubber meets the road. And so as I'm sitting here listening to you share, I'm curious, what is some things that people say about resilience that sound great, but they don't actually hold up when life gets brutally hard?
That's a great question. I've heard people that are like, I've got this, I've got this. It's under control. And you can just tell by the way they say it, or the look in their eyes, or the look on their face. Yeah, you don't got this. You don't got this at all. You're you're relying on your strength alone. And again, this is bigger than us. And every night I say, before I fall asleep, I say kind of my version of the Our Father. And, Our Father who art in heaven, Dad, hallowed be thy name. Holy, blessed, and sacred is your name. Your kingdom come. You sent your Son down here with us to conquer sin and death, to bring people together, to bring your people to yourself. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. Thy will be done. What does that mean? God put each of us here for a reason. And that reason is different for all of us. But how many people actually look for that reason, and once they find it, then live that reason? So many people spend their entire life just muddling through life without ever understanding or contemplating what it means to be great at something purposeful. in our lives. And so I think we have this thing that like I can handle it. I'm tough. I'm strong. I'm all this kind of stuff. We are made great in our weakness. And I think when we understand that and we don't try to be, again, we take off the mask. I'm this bravado that I'm putting out there of look how strong, look how tough I can handle this. I really can't by myself. I need God's help. I need other people's help. Bringing that together. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear that, so many times. And I think a lot of times it's around me. People see me and they're like, oh, I got this. I got this. And it's like, you don't understand. This isn't just me. This is something bigger than me. And you're trying to do it by yourself. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I hear, that I see about resilience.
I love that you're not taking the credit. It's not me, it's him. It's all him. It's all God, because you can't do it alone. I mean, you yourself had said when you were going through this season where every weekend you had the flu because of the shot that you were taking, and you were like, God, I'm done. Like, just take me. I'm done with this. But you stayed in the fight, and he gave you the strength that is needed to continue. For the people out there that are listening, that they feel stuck, they feel defeated, not because they quit, but because they're exhausted. I'm sure you've been there. What does perseverance actually look like in a healthy way?
Yeah, I like I said, sometimes perseverance is a good day was I can get to the bed, from the bed to the sofa. That was a win. You're like, well, it's no big deal. Like when you felt as lousy as I did, yeah, that was a big deal. And things like that. So I guess I would say be kind to yourself. But I would also say this. My wife works with a young man who is a former Navy SEAL, some of the toughest individuals in the world. And he's kind enough that on my off weeks of treatment, he calls me just to check up on me. Hey, how you doing? And we talk a lot about that SEAL mentality that, they beat you down to where you have nothing left. And the SEALs talk about their 40% rule, which basically says if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you can't go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum, and you still have another 60% left in reserve for yourself. So in those times when you think I'm done, I'm so depleted, I can't go on. And I've been there. I've been depleted mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I am done. I can't go on. I always think about that. I think about, no, I'm not even half at what I can still give to myself. And I had a blood clot in my lung and fluid around the sac of my heart one time. And I remember I was in that state. I was so done. And I was in the ER. My wife was sitting right here. And I turned to her, I had tears running down. I said, just let me go. Let me go, which was a horrible thing to say to her because she didn't have the power to dispatch me, even if I wanted to. But I was done. And I remember just closing my eyes and thinking about that 40% rule. It's like, no, you have more to give. You have more things to do, because otherwise God would have taken you by now. And so I just, I just look at that. I've been there. I get it. But we know this from marathon runners. At some point, a marathon runner will hit what they call the wall. They will be like, I'm done. There's no more glucose in my body. I can't keep going. But if you can put just put one foot in front of the other, keep going, one foot in front of the other. We know this from marathon runners. You will push through that wall, come out the other side, get your second wind, and be able to finish the race. That's life. That's the way it is. When you are at your lowest, that's when God is at his greatest, and he will get you to put one foot in front of the other. He will get you to the finish line if you allow him to. But you can't quit. You can't give up. You can't say, you know what? You can say, I'm done. I'm depleted. I got nothing. I get there, been there, but rely on something that's bigger than you. I keep coming back to that. It's always something that's bigger than you. If you think you're going to do it by yourself, you're going to have a really hard time with it.
Yeah, it's just like I said in the introduction for the show, and I say it every episode. God does his best work in the middle of our mess, because that's when we have to say, okay, I can't do this anymore. And we have to truly rely on him, because it's finally gotten through to us that, hey, we're not the ones in control, and you have to rely on him.
You do.
You have lived through some high stakes environments. You've lived everything from SWAT negotiations to hospital administration to you name it. It feels like you've done it. So how has pressure revealed character in your own life?
Yeah, I think when we're under pressure, who you are really comes out. How you treat people, how you show up really does manifest itself under pressure. And I think pressure can go two ways. You can be a jerk. I'm a really nice guy, but when you're under pressure in business or health or whatever like that, your real side comes out. The other thing is you can say about pressure is what does pressure do? Pressure makes diamonds. Tremendous pressure makes diamonds, and diamonds shine. The same thing can happen to you. I love to read. I spend a lot of time reading. And when I was in high school, I read Farewell to Arms, which is a book written by Ernest Hemingway. And it's a fiction book, but it's a kind of a semi-autobiographical account of Hemingway's time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in that book, Wesley, that I absolutely love, that I think illustrates this point. And the line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So that pressure can make you a better human being. It would be just like if you broke your arm, a doctor would set the arm, put it in a cast. When that arm heals, the area at the break will be stronger than the rest of the arm. That's a metaphor for life. If you can take the pressure, if you can take the difficulty, the ugliness, the adversity, and use it, you can come out the other end a more resilient individual, a more humble individual, a more loving individual, a more caring individual. It will make you a better person if you allow that pressure to do that.
When you think about helping people and coming out the other side and being that diamond, how do you help people lead well at home or work when they're personally exhausted or hurting, and you may be feeling the same way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I've got a great answer for it. Honestly, I think, because we all have those down days, and I do. I mean, I don't want your audience. I mean, you're looking at me now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have bad days. I cry. I get down. I feel sorry for myself. But when I'm doing that, I'm finding I'm looking inwards. Woe is me. Look at me. I'm having a bad day. For me, I find a very easy way to get out of that is to go help another human being. You're probably old enough to remember Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who
Yeah.
educated so many young people on public television, including myself when I was growing up. Fred Rogers died in 2003, and his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. So when I find, I'm down, I'm depressed, I'm exhausted, I don't think I can go on, I'm looking inward. I'm thinking how bad things are. And I find a way to get out of that is just pick up the phone and call somebody I know who has cancer or is having a bad time. Or if I'm, in a waiting room, go wheel over to somebody and introduce myself who looks like they're having. Now all of a sudden, I'm not focused on me. I'm not focused inward. I'm focused outside. I'm trying to make a difference in another human being's life. And for me, I think it's a real simple way to just say, okay, I'm not focused on me. I'm focused on somebody else now. I'm trying to make a difference in their life. And that makes me feel better. That makes me want to be a better human being. That makes me want to share, hey, you know, God is working through me, whether I say that or whether I just model it. And I think modeling is a very important part too. How do you act in the tough times? How do you act when the chips are down? You know, are you down, depressed, and can't handle it? Or are you like, you know what? Going to rely on God. I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'm going to do the best I can. And again, going back to that definition of success, am I laying on the ground totally spent, knowing that I did the very best that I could possibly do for myself, for another human being, for my creator? If the answer to that is yes, I think you try to handle it that way.
You know, when you think about everything you've been through and the journey that you've been on and the way that you've helped people and all that, you can't help but kind of start thinking legacy, right? And so when you think about legacy, what is the legacy that you are most intentional about building right now as a leader, a parent, and even a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, that should be what it's all about. What are you leaving behind? One of the one of the four truths is what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. What are you weaving in other people's hearts? What difference are you making? What values are you putting out there and watching people either take them or not take them? And I can only live by example. And when I had my leg amputated and I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church. And I planned my funeral. And because I come on podcasts like yours or I give talks in person, I actually got some brushback from people who were like, well, planning your funeral, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? And I was like, well, last time I checked, I think we're all going to die. Don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. And I remember I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely loved. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for, at the end when this is all said and done. I did the very best. I laid it all on the line. I gave you everything that I had physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever you want to say. And hopefully when I die, I'll hear, well done, good and faithful servant. I hope that's what I hear. Because I've always said, Wesley, I've done more living in the 14 years I've been dying of cancer than I've done in my entire life. And I had a pretty good life before I got sick.
How has your faith, how has your faith um, been transformed through all of this? You mentioned, not being able to do it on your own and having to truly lean on him. But I can't help but imagine that through all of this, you've had to experience maybe even some hard truths and faith transformation. Talk us through kind of briefly that faith transformation that has taken place over this last 14 years and maybe where you were pre-cancer and to where you are today because of cancer.
Yeah, I mean, cancer is certainly deep in my faith. I'm a cradle Catholic. I was an altar boy when I was growing up. I mean, went to church all the time. And I remember when I had my knee surgeries, my mom, I was my second knee surgery. They took out 25 pieces of my bone, told me I wouldn't play basketball anymore. I might not walk normally again. And they put me in a cast from my hip to my ankle for the entire summer. And right before school started, they cut the cast off. And every Sunday, my mother used to hand the keys of the car to my dad. We would all pile into the Mercury Marquis Brougham that we had. I used to say, if we had a turret, it could double as a tank. And this thing was huge. And my brothers and I would get in the car with my parents, and we would go to Columbus Hospital, which was a hospital that was founded by St. Francis Xavier Cabrini, the first American citizen to be canonized a saint in the Catholic Church. And while, my brothers and dad and I would look at, they kind of had a shrine there for, this was her room, these are her clothes and stuff like that. My mom would be talking to the nun that ran the gift shop. And she was a very portly woman, uh, had a very thick Italian accent. But Wesley, we never left there without a brown bag full of prayer cards, medals, holy water, and things like that. I swear, at one time we had enough holy water, we could have filled the bathtub and baptized everybody in the city of Chicago. I mean, it really, it was, but every night and every morning, I would put that holy water on my knee and, and say a prayer. And eventually I got back on the basketball court, and eventually I got a scholarship to play in college. I believed in God, but not the way I believe in him now, because I've literally been at death's doorstep so many times. Some of my own, like, yeah, please take me, get me out of here. I'm good. Let's go. And some not of my own doing, that I didn't want to die. And my faith is so much deeper. You know, the world is crazy. There's so much going on. There's social media. There's a lot of noise. And I think that faith got deepened in those hospital rooms at night where it was quiet and I was hurting and I had nothing to do but pray. And so that definitely has deepened my faith.
Wow. Terry, I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I want to give you a chance here to be able to talk to the listeners. And, if they're out there and they're like, man, Terry, I want to hear more of your story, because we're only an hour podcast and you can really just scratch the surface. So where can they find you online? Where can they hear more of your story? And where can they find your book?
Yeah, so the easiest place, I mean, the books I've written too, they're available anywhere you can get a book online. Easiest way is to go to Amazon and get them. I have a blog, a website called Motivational Check. You can reach out to me there at motivationalcheck.com. I love hearing from people. I love engaging in, back and forth, talking with people and that. So please, if you got something out of this episode with Wesley and I, please reach out and leave me a comment at motivationalcheck.com.
Perfect. And I'll leave those links down in the show notes for those that are looking for it. So, Terry, one of the things that I love to do on this show is I love to leave my listeners with a action step, something that they can kind of chew on over the next week or so, something that they can maybe do right now to move forward in their own journey of being unmasked. And so if somebody out there today is listening and they feel worn down, they feel discouraged, maybe they feel quietly defeated, what's one question that you would encourage them to ask themselves right now this week to begin moving forward again?
This is going to be kind of simple. It's like, what if? What if I could start that business that, has been beating me? What if I could go for treatment, even though I feel sick and tired and beaten and broken? What if I could make another overture to be a friend to that person? I think we get to a point where I can't do anymore. I'm done. What if? What if you tried? What if that person responded to you? What if you got better because of the treatment? What if that business started? What would that look like in your life? So I guess I would say, what if? What if you kept going? What if you tried again tomorrow? And so many people just quit, and they quit when they're so close. If you just have a little bit of grit, just a little in your life, go back to the the four types of people in the world. Most people are unmotivated. You got a little bit of grit. Think where you can go with that. Whether it's physical, mental, emotional, you want to start a business, you want to ask somebody out, you want to get married, you want to have kids, whatever that is. What if? What would that look like? I guess that's a question I would ask. What if?
What if? What if? Well, Terry, thanks for joining us today on Unmasked and sharing your story with us and being so vulnerable. We really appreciate it.
Well, Wesley, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thanks for joining me today on Unmasked. And again, a huge thanks to Terry for being so open and honest with us today and sharing his story. If something in this episode spoke to you, don't let it stop with you. Share it with the one person that God put on your heart while you were listening, because you never know whose breakthrough might start with just that simple message from you. If you want more encouragement, you want to work with me one-on-one, or you're interested in having me speak at your church or event, you can find everything you need at wesleyfarnsworth.com. And make sure you join the Unmasked community by connecting with me on social media so that we can keep walking this journey together. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and freedom begins the moment that you choose to live unmasked. God bless you.